And we are live, Senators.
Good morning. This is Senate Health and Welfare. It is Friday, April 7th. And we are looking at two bills that have come to us from the House, one on radiologic assistance and the other on psychology compact. So Representative Houghton, why don't you come up, and I'm thinking it would be helpful for your schedule if you introduce both of the bills.
That'd be great,
Just
thank
talk to you a little bit. That'd be great.
Sure. So Lori Houghton, Representative Lori Houghton, I'm the chair of the House Healthcare Committee. Thanks for having me. So I'll start with the radiology assistance one. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to read a little bit of what I said on the floor. So today's rules governing radiology assistants require them to be supervised by a radiologist who is on site with the assistant. So they both have to physically be in the same location. This requirement creates redundancy between the radiologist and the assistant. And we heard in testimony that it's particularly challenging as the recruitment for radiologists has become increasingly more difficult. An immediate concern is at Porter Hospital, where the current group of radiologists are looking to either retire or scale back their schedules. So this could mean if all the radiologists leave and a new radiologist cannot be recruited, patients in the Porter catchment area would need to travel to another hospital for those services. So the advocates came forward with basically two changes at H 473 and how it would modernize our rules. One, the first will allow direct supervision of a radiologist assistant through synchronous audio and or visual means. So let's go back to the Porter example. There's no radiologist working in that hospital. There could be assistant doing the work, but there could be a radiologist at, say, Central Vermont who could be overseeing that person. The second would allow radiologist assistants to communicate to patients the technical performance of a procedure in real time during or immediately after a procedure. So I don't know if you've ever been in for a radiology appointment and they do a test and you kind of leave there a little nervous, like, oh, did they get what they needed? Am I gonna have to come back? And right now they can't say anything. So this would allow them to say, not, we saw something or we didn't see something, but we got what we needed to get, a doctor will get back to you. So it's that simple. Any questions?
Questions?
Shall we vote?
Exactly. See, just like that. You all are fast.
This is the one you assigned me, I think,
Huh?
the radiology bill. This is gonna be mine.
Okay.
I was just at Porter for an X-ray, in fact. And it went fine, but that's a good example. Like, it's clearly like planted there for me.
Right, exactly.
Not a question, just a comment that it seems like a really great use of technology.
Yeah.
So.
Right. And with all of the telehealth changes that we've had in this state, it just seems to us to make sense. Again, our workforce issues to allow this to happen.
Absolutely.
Is there any pushback?
And there was absolutely no pushback. I don't. We heard from obviously the Legislative Council, the Executive Director of the Vermont Board of Medical Practice, radiologist assistants from the University of Vermont Medical Center. So we see no pushback.
Okay, seems like a difficult bill.
Yeah, it was an easy one. I hesitate to say that normally, but that.
No, this is helpful. And as you said, with all of the technology that we currently have for communication.
And I will say there is, and I'm sure Legislative Council will go through it. There is a requirement that a doctor still needs to be on site at the hospital, just not a radiologist.
Right.
So that if there was something that happened, an MD could step in, but it just doesn't have to be a radiologist.
Actually, one quick question. You may have said this and I may have missed it, but does the radiologist need to be in state?
So that is a good question, and you might hear from someone later that might have a slate amendment to discuss that.
What was the question?
If the radiologist needs to be in state.
Oh, okay.
That did not come up in any of our testimony, but it's good here.
Yeah, the whole concept of compact in that regard is.
Right, yeah,
totally
right.
right.
And element. Right. I hope you all appreciate all the context.
We- It's so exciting. We love those.
Go ahead.
So I see a lot of what we're doing in the medical field is due to shortage of personnel. If what this bill proposes and passes, is there ever going to be an effort to try and replace the cardiologist or the radiologist that we don't have? And who's going to supervise if they come back to full staff?
Right, so we haven't had those discussions in the committee. I'm sure they're being discussed within, the healthcare arena. It's, radiologists, it's very extensive training, just as it is for radiologist assistants. So I don't think they will ever go away. They're just finding a hard time recruiting them.
Okay,
So then the other one, the psychology compact, you obviously all know what a compact is. So the psychology compact does two things. It will allow compact members to practice telepsychology, and it will allow temporary practice credentials for 30 days. And the compact will give licensed psychologists outside Vermont the ability to provide telehealth and then that limited care of 30 days to Vermont residents. And it's, Jen will go through the bill and provide all the technical details of the compact. There's 36 states that currently are in the compact, including New Hampshire and Maine. And again, we had no one come against it. Everyone was in full support.
okay. So the 30-day pieces are for the dental,
Psychology.
just only psych.
This is just
This
psychology,
is
psychology, interjurisdictional.
That thing over there is starting.
Oh, okay, we'll
It's
turn
okay,
it
leave it on.
What?
We'll turn it
ears-
Oh, yeah.
I have to do the Valsalva. Okay.
This is different from what J.C. McCracken brought to us. Did you know?
She did, this is it, okay,
Same?
yes,
Okay.
so this is the same, yes.
Great. Thanks.
I assume. Well, she also did the interstate counseling compact. Yeah, so I think she came on H62.
Right.
So this is psychologists, that is counselors,
That's, yeah,
the difference.
okay.
That's okay, she is the floor reporter, I'm filling in.
Right,
for
right.
her here, yes.
Okay.
We're good?
Yeah.
Jerry, you had a question? No? Okay. Anybody else? Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Good to see you.
You too, enjoy your day.
All right, Jen,
It's my perfume.
I like the airflow, but it's loud.
it's good, it's on now. Okay, so we'll have a little, so Jen, walk through, I guess, 473 first, very briefly. And then we'll identify if there's a place where we might want to have more testimony. Yeah.
Okay. So Jen Kirby, Legislative Counsel, H 473 is an act relating to radiologist assistants, and you got an overview from Representative Houghton. And just because some of this was an education for me as well, there's radiologists who are physicians, there's radiologist assistants who are sort of the mid-level practitioners, and then there's radiologic technicians who are probably the ones who are doing your x-ray and that kind of stuff. So that these radiologist assistants are radiologic technicians plus some additional training and considerable additional training and experience. So that's who we're talking about, and we do regulate them as a standalone profession. So this would, in the existing statutes, there are requirements for supervision. And under the existing statutes, there's a requirement that at a minimum, supervision means that a radiologist is readily available for consultation and intervention. That's existing law. This bill would give a definition of readily available as meaning that a radiologist is available in person or is available remotely by telephone or through a live interactive audio and video connection. So that's where we introduce this idea of them being available, but not necessarily in person. Then section 2 in the supervision and scope of practice statute. So under existing law, there's language saying that the number of radiologist assistants permitted to practice under the direction and supervision of a radiologist would be determined by the Board of Medical Practice and be consistent with guidelines adopted by the national specialty organizations. And I note, I'm not sure if Representative Houghton mentioned it or not, there's currently one licensed radiologist assistant in the state. So we're not talking about a large supervisory load at this point. Under existing law, the authority of the radiologist assistant to practice terminates immediately if they stop their employment, and then they can't practice again until they provide proof that they have that they're employed again. So they always have to have a supervising radiologist. They can't practice unless they have that supervising radiologist. So then the bill would add new language saying, if a supervising radiologist is not physically present at the location where the radiologist assistant is practicing, then the radiologist assistant shall provide services only when a licensed physician, so MD or osteopathic physician, who need not be a radiologist, is physically present at the location and would be responsible for providing intervention or assistance in the event of a medical emergency. So that's the piece Representative Houghton was saying. There has to be a physician there, but it doesn't have to be a radiologist because the supervision part can be happening remotely. And then in subsection B of the existing law, it talks about the radiologist assistant scope of practice being limited to that is delegated to them by their primary supervising radiologist, and for which the radiologist assistant is qualified by education, training, and experience. And at no point can the radiologist assistant exceed the normal scope of their supervisory practice. Under existing law as well, the radiologist assistant is not allowed to interpret images, make diagnoses, or prescribe medications or therapies. This would not change that, but this would add in some new language saying that the radiologist assistant may communicate with patients regarding the radiologist assistant's preliminary observations regarding the technical performance of a procedure or examination and regarding the findings from a radiologist's report. Preliminary observations shall not include any communication about the presence or absence of features or characteristics that would be considered in making a diagnosis. So they can say, you know, looks like we got all of the angles we were going for, or it looks like the contrast, you know, worked as intended, or whatever it would be about the technical performance, but not, I didn't see anything that looked concerning, or, you know, right. I can't say any of that stuff, leave that still to the radiologist, but they can at least give the patient some assurance about how the procedure went.
Was there a discussion about scope of practice for radiologic assistants? I mean, so is it x-rays, MRIs, CAT scans?
There was some talk that I will defer to others who work in this area. There was testimony from the radiologist assistant herself and from the Board of Medical Practice about what they do, which is actually where I learned more about. I think I was describing originally more the technician duties, and it's really a higher level than that.
Okay. So I'm thinking we probably will get the Board of Medical Practice in and maybe another person.
I think that's great.
Radiologist.
Yep.
That'll help us, and then it doesn't feel like a controversial bill at this point. All right, thank you. Questions? All right. Let's move on to 282, and this one is a compact bill.
It is a compact
So
bill.
we've been taking a very high level,
Great.
and given where we are, we do have time. I mean, we've got about half an hour for this, so we might want to take a break just before we move into the budget discussion.
That's fine. I don't know how, I mean, I'll spend as long on this one as you want. You
Okay.
don't have it yet. It just passed on third
Yeah.
reading yesterday.
Yeah.
So this, as Representative Houghton said, is H-282, an act relating to the Psychology Interjurisdictional Compact. And the bill would codify this in our existing chapter in Title 26 on psychologists. It starts out by having Vermont enact and adopt the compact, and specifies that the form, format, and text have been conformed to the conventions of Vermont statutes annotated That means I did as much as I felt comfortable doing to Vermontify the language. For example, the model language used and/or, which we do not do here in Vermont. So I did, A or B or both, which is how we convey that concept. But it is the intent that the SEP chapter be interpreted as substantially the same as the compact enacted by other compact party states. And there does seem to be room for a little bit of clarification for statutory style. So then it goes into purpose statement, talking about the purpose of
Do
the
you want to put
compact.
it up on the screen? Because there are a couple of folks who don't have their.
I have it.
I can, as
Yeah.
I warn you, it's 46 pages long, and I'm not going through most of it, so I don't know if it's,
Okay, whatever you think best.
there's a, you'll
Have
be watching me
screen.
scroll a lot. It's up to you.
It's not clear, but I'm-
Okay, just
I'm
go
aware
ahead,
of this
Jen.
list.
Okay.
I'm not worried.
All right,
Um,
4 out of 5 have it. So.
So as Representative Houghton said, this one is a little bit different from a lot of the compacts and most of the compacts that I think you've looked at. It really is kind of a streamlined process for getting a regular state license. This is its own specific kind of compact license. So we wouldn't be issuing a specific Vermont license. And there are two tracks that a psychologist could take with the compact licenses. They can do either or both. One of them is what they call an e-passport. And that's a certificate issued by the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards that promotes the standardization and the criteria of interjurisdictional telepsychology practice and facilitates the process for licensed psychologists to provide telepsychological services across state lines. So that their e-passport is the telepsychology route, or it would just be remote. Or there is the interjurisdictional practice certificate. That's the one that's called, which is a certificate granting temporary authority to practice in person in another state for up to 30 days. And so, as I said, the psychologist could choose to do one or the other or both. There are a couple of terms in the statute, in the compact, that I think are important in understanding the compact, because they're to some extent a little bit different from what we sometimes use. There's home state, which in this case is a compact state where a psychologist is licensed to practice psychology, but they can have more than one home state. So if the psychologist is licensed in more than one compact state and is practicing under the authorization to practice interjurisdictional telepsychology, then the home state is the compact state where they are physically present when they are performing the telepsychological services.
Jen?
Yeah.
You mentioned an e-passport.
Yes.
Is that something that is in existence now?
In the context of this compact, it is.
It does exist now.
Well, for states that are doing this compact.
Okay, for Vermont,
No, because Vermont's not in the compact.
got you. Okay, I'm only asking because I'm getting a whole bunch of emails lately about vaccine passports.
Mhm.
So that
which
would be
are very
different.
Different.
Very
Okay,
different,
all
very
right.
different.
Okay,
This is sort of a term of art. It's literally E passport. So
Okay.
it is a term of art in the context of this compact that is just your, a psychologist's authorization to deliver telepsychology through participation in this compact.
interesting phraseology.
It
Okay.
is.
All right.
Well,
I'll just leave it
everybody's
at that.
using it, all these.
All right,
Yeah.
Yes.
E-things are the new
Yes.
thing.
Usually it's E dash. This is E period.
the passport is an interesting term.
All right, so if the psychologist is licensed in more than one compact state and is using the interjurisdictional telepsychology, using their e-passport, then the home state is the compact state where the psychologist is physically present when they are performing telepsychology services. If they are licensed in more than one compact state and they're practicing under the temporary authorization to practice, then the home state is any compact state where the psychologist is licensed. Which comes up later in some of the regulation and disciplinary
Jim,
pieces.
what page you on?
Those definitions are on page 6.
Okay. Thank you.
Then on bottom of page 7, thank you, I will try to flag those as we go through. There's a definition of receiving state. That is a compact state where the client or patient is physically located when telepsychological services are delivered. So if we're just looking at telepsychology, then the home state would be wherever the provider is, and the receiving state would be wherever the patient is. If you go back up, though, to the bottom of page 5, we have the definition of distant state, which is distant site is a term we use when we talk about telemedicine. So that's why I wanted to flag it, 'cause it's a little different. The distant state means the compact state where a psychologist is physically present, not through the use of telecommunications technologies, to provide temporary in-person, face-to-face psychological services. So if the psychologist travels using this temporary authority, then they travel to a distant state.
Got it.
Wow, this is
But
like.
this is different from when you look at telemedicine.
Right.
When they talk about the distant state, they're talking about the home physician.
The distance, right, so the distance site is
Different.
right, is where the patient is
I know,
for telemedicine.
okay.
So that's just why I
Nothing like
wanted
having
to
consistency.
flag this, right, and we unfortunately can't change this. It's coming.
These compacts remind me of game night when you're doing a new board game and somebody's trying to explain the rules of the board game and you're like, wait, I don't remember, I can't figure out how to do this. And it's always like, it'll make sense when you start to play the game.
Right.
And that's what it totally
That
reminds me
makes
of.
sense to the
Yeah.
people who are doing it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
but I do have also a question in addition to that comment.
Yes.
So I noticed that this thing is called the Association of State and Provincial. Provincial. Does that mean it
Canada.
includes Canada?
Yes.
And so could somebody from Canada come to, do we allow?
We often look at just, I don't know, I mean, in the medical practice stuff, I think there's some greater flexibility with Canada than there is with other countries, but that's a good question. That might be an OPR question.
Okay, because I mean, they're closer than a lot of the other states to us, so.
Right, so the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards is a membership organization composed of state and provincial psychology regulatory authorities responsible for the licensure and registration of psychologists throughout the US and Canada.
So OPR is gonna be coming in
Great.
one day next week, I forget which day, but
Okay.
they're gonna come in and they're gonna talk about all the compacts together so we can.
They're
get
gonna
it.
explain the game,
They're gonna
the
explain
rules
game
to all the
us.
games on one day. It's gonna be really confusing.
So we can ask that question. I noticed that it's interjurisdictional rather than interstate when we were talking.
That is
earlier.
true.
So
That is true.
triggered
Perhaps
for me,
that is
it
why.
could be somewhere else.
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't remember that
Guam?
coming,
Could be Puerto Rico,
specifically coming up.
Puerto Rico County State, but what about Guam? It's our territories? Would that be interjurisdictional?
I mean, typically when we have talked about interstate, we have, for our own purposes, we have actually defined it more broadly to include territories and
Yeah,
US territories as well.
okay, well, we won't hold you up.
All right. So, this goes through a lot of just the mechanics of how it works, and having compact states recognizing that, so I'm currently on page 11 in compact privilege to practice telepsychology. It goes through the right of the psychologist who's licensed in a compact state to practice telepsychology in other compact states, which it says are called receiving states, where the psychologist is not licensed under the authority to practice interjurisdictional telepsychology as provided in the compact. And it talks about the educational requirements and accreditation requirements for that. And then it goes through on starting on page 15 in section 3026, the compact temporary authorization to practice. And that's where the psychologist can practice temporarily in other compact states called distant states, where the psychologist is not licensed. And again, the educational and training experience or credentials that are necessary. It is a narrower subset, and OPR can talk to you more about the specifics of the educational requirements, but it is there is more limited eligibility for this compact than for some of the other counseling compacts that we have been looking at.
So this is interesting. I remember when we were putting together our sort of our community mental health programs and our weekend college programs where I work. So, we did talk about having distance learning and allowing for psychologists from the southern part of the state to teach academically, but there were certain requirements. And I'm looking at the requirements here for the degree. So theoretically now we could increase our access to academic folks through this. Could have, so I'm just thinking about education committee.
Yeah.
Anyway,
All right, then it goes through the disciplinary provisions, adverse actions. So we're on page 19.
what page are we on then?
19.
Yeah, we'll get there.
It gives the home state the power to impose adverse action against the psychologist's license issued by the home state. And a distant state has the power to take adverse action on a psychologist's temporary authorization to practice within that distant state. And then for the telepsychology piece, a receiving state can take adverse action on a psychologist's authority to practice telepsychology in that receiving state. And a home state can take adverse action against a psychologist based on an adverse action taken by a distant state regarding temporary in-person face-to-face practice.
So questions that we can ask OPR and others when they come in are around how all of this is overseen, regulated, how do you?
Right, I mean, there is a compact commission for this one, like for the other compacts that regulates this piece. And I will just note, as far as at least the telepsychology piece goes, we do also have currently in place is the temporary telehealth registration, but soon we will have the full telehealth licensure and registration for providers who want to be licensed to perform telehealth in Vermont. So you could have psychologists choosing to come through Vermont's telehealth licensure process to deliver telepsychology services, or this would give them the option of coming through the compact. And then
I was just saying, this one's a little different than the other stuff.
Huh?
Some different nuances about this one.
Yes,
that I-
right, I know it is.
all right, then there's a number of provisions dealing with the disciplinary investigation processes, all of that. Coordinated licensure information system. There is a psychology interjurisdictional compact commission. So we would have a commissioner assigned from this state. There are provisions allowing the compact commission to impose dues or fees. And I don't know if you're going to be hearing from Nolan on that.
Yeah.
There is
You have a fiscal note for us on this one.
It's on the list. Anyway,
Yeah, okay, good.
And the House did amend on the floor the effective date so that it would be July of 2024, that this would take effect. OPR had asked for some additional time. They're implementing, as you know, or potentially implementing a number of compacts. So they had asked to push that date out. And that is really, there's a lot about how the compact commission operates. It has an executive board, it gives its authority, the authorities there. The compact on page 44, so it's rolling almost to the end, the compact was to come into effect on the date on which it was enacted into law in the 7th compact state. As you heard from Representative Houghton, 36 states have adopted it. I think either 34 or 35 currently have it in effect. One of them was about to take effect, and the other one I think starts in July. So then we will have 36 states in it at that point. So it is in effect. We can withdraw from the compact by enacting a statute repealing the compact, and then it would be 6 months after that that we would be out of the compact. And that is really it. It will take effect on, this passed the House on July 1st, 2024.
Sure. Okay. Questions about this one? It is different.
It is different. It's narrower both in eligibility for the providers and in the scope of what they can do with the compact license.
Where are we at with the conversation we had about that language about compacts that's in S37?
Right, we aren't there yet, but there's language that is in S37 directing compacts to consider our concerns
Mhm.
about reproductive autonomy and gender-affirming care. So,
Yes, and there was testimony actually just taken yesterday in House Healthcare on that. They heard from the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact folks that you heard from and from David Hurley from the Board of Medical Practice.
so I guess the question is, should we and do we need to put that language into each of the compact bills that we consider?
Put which language?
That is in S37.
About having them try to.
Is that, given
I don't
that-
think it's necessary to put it in each one. You just, I mean, if you pass it in one place.
But is it broad in there?
Yeah, it
Or
goes
I thought it
to-
was specific to Board of Medical.
No, it gives those as an including, because those are the ones that we're currently members of, but it is broader.
Okay, I didn't realize it. I thought it was specific to the ones
No,
we're
it
already
goes right
in.
out to
No.
Colorado.
I think,
Yeah,
Yeah,
because this one would definitely be relevant to that.
absolutely.
So,
Right, and we do have, so the laws that we have regarding conversion therapy, for example, would have to be adhered to by a psychologist practicing in this state.
practicing with Vermont
Yeah.
residents, yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm just gonna pull up the language and make sure, but,
So, and that's a question also that we've had previously. Are there individual representatives to for each of these compacts, or do we have a single representative for all of the compacts?
I believe we have separate representatives. It may in fact be the same person serving the role on more than one.
Right.
But, and you can ask OPR who the representatives are to the
So
compact.
but that does raise the question about directing our compact representatives then to carry forward.
Right, but you have, I mean,
Okay, we've done that.
in
Just wanted
the
to
bill,
clarify
it
that.
says
We've done
Vermont's representative or delegate for an interstate compact or agreement related to healthcare shall seek an amendment, exception, et cetera. I think the language may get tweaked a little bit based on some of the testimony yesterday, just to be clearer about where it seems most likely that Vermont can have that kind of impact.
Okay.
So potentially less so in the compact language itself, more likely in the rules or bylaws, because otherwise the changes would have to be ratified by all of the member states as opposed to just the compact commission.
Yeah.
So that was some
And that would
testimony from
never
Board of
happen.
Medical Practice. Well, it would be a lot more time consuming and a longer process, so.
All right, that's good. That helps. Nolan, do you want to give us just quickly look at what the fiscal note is for?
Sure, as long as you do.
Yeah, sure. We'll put just a couple minutes because we're going to take a 5-minute break before we dive into listening about the budget issues. And we have your fiscal note.
For the record, Nolan Langlois with Joint Fiscal Office. There is a fiscal note posted. It says draft only because the final bill has yet to be posted, so I can't link it to the actual bill. When the actual bill gets posted, I will make it permanent. This bill has had a lot of iterations. Initially, Senate Health and Welfare, not Senate Health and Welfare, House Ways and Means additionally tried to add the OPR fees to it.
I
And the
know, I
clerk-
actually saw that was a long.
Then the clerk determined it was not germane, so it was pulled out. But then they moved the date. And because the date was moved to July 2024, this wouldn't have a fiscal impact immediately because the renewal date for this particular one is even years, January, even years. So the new people would have to be renewing their licenses before the compact goes into effect. So there wouldn't be impact, because the impact normally would be, as you recall with the other ones, the loss of the revenues from the out-of-state people from those compact states buying a compact instead of buying a Vermont license. So to the extent that those folks decide they want to continue to practice and have to buy the Vermont license, I don't expect there to be a big impact in 24. Maybe there'll be a few people that say, I'm gonna go without for 6 months, but I doubt it. But anyway, long story short, there's not really gonna be a fiscal impact from this one like the other ones. And in 26, it would hit bigger in 26, and it could be 18 to 20,000 by then under the current fee structure. And depending on how many out-of-state compacts, there are at that time. So, that's way out. The only other piece that Jen mentioned was, unlike the other ones where we could do a privileged practice fee, this one, we can't do a privileged practice fee. As a matter of fact, they charge us. I think it's
1,000?
they charge
6,000.
member states an annual $10 fee per licensee who claims a member state as their home state. It's capped at 6,000. But based on some estimates that I received from OPR, I suspect it would be less than $1,000 per year. So it's really a very nominal impact. So in short, I don't expect this one to have an immediate fiscal impact on the state.
So if they want to buy license from Vermont, where's the money come from? Where does it go to? Who gets the
Currently,
money?
when you buy a license in Vermont, you pay the state and it goes into this OPR fund. And that's the money that's used to help fund OPR in the regulatory functions. And they have a fund, and this fees for all of those, not just psychologists, it's barbers and everybody, and so it goes into their fund, and that's how they fund themselves. So to the extent that the fee schedules change, or who knows. And that's a bigger question, though, in terms of how OPR is doing financially in general. And that's a question for them. And there's some stuff in the fiscal note that talks about some of the things that they would need done to help them sort of prep for all the different contacts. And so you'll be hearing from OPR about that.
Okay. And you gave us a fiscal note for the other.
Yeah, I gave you a memo. It doesn't really reflect the most recent changes to this
Okay.
one on there. I'll update it, but really it's not going to be a huge
Yeah.
update because
This one
this
just
one,
has 62, 77, and 86.
and that's, yeah. And so because I don't think there's a lot of an impact
Okay.
in the immediate, in 24 or 25, there's really not much to add to that memo regarding this one.
Okay.
But I still think that's helpful in general when OPR comes in and you're trying to put all the different moving pieces together. That's why I did it.
Good. Thank you. That's great. All right. We're going to take a 4-minute break.